Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Utopia, episode 3. So, we go on, and the real reason of which, because I was supposed to, review this X amount of days ago, I ended up having Yellowstone come out, the latest episode of Yellowstone. So I'm like, well, that's a newer show. This I can do whenever. So here we are. And plus, also, I needed to possibly decompress from that last episode because I was like, oh my god, there's so much stuff. Whatever. In this one, it's kind of slowed down a little bit more to where I can hopefully get everything out of this and more. And more. But anyways, in this episode, we of course have Jessica Hyde being the finder out of her comic book kind of counterparts, her other comic book people. She is to figure out either who they are or where they are, or if there are to be certain people in this world also besides her. So those kind of reveals are really interesting. We also get a much more backstory on the grandfather who had died to give this wedded couple a home for them to die also. That sucks, right? But oh well. So we have Michael, who is to kind of get a how can I do this? Michael is to get a blood sample to confirm that this new virus is to, of course, be Michael's. And so now Michael has to go on and talk to Christy to see what they're going to do about it. Christy seems to be jumping the gun, but Michael wants to pull back a little bit. Just because it seems like his flu is to be at the very, bottom level of actual, qualified things for testing and so on and so forth. And Christy is just kind of like, come on, let's go. Why is it that you're stalling? Why is it that you're... So we have this kind of figuring out of what's going on with these characters. And so we have Grant reconnecting with the rest of group character people, the Utopia group. But we also have both Wilson and Becky kind of taking a minute here to realize where they have where they are now. All the things that has happened via these 3 episodes. And, you can like that, but you can also just be, I guess they just needed this little kind of stuff to just, bide for time. Because there's so much other things going on in this show that they had to have, one slowing down moment here. But yeah, so with that said, I think that's all that I probably want to go in to talk about in a quasi-cryptic-like sense. And so let's go out of our way to go into spoiler-like sense for this review. And hopefully, if there's something that I missed, that's bound to happen. So let me know in the comments below so that way other people could know in case I missed something. And hopefully it's not a small, tiny detail, because more likely a pronouncing of a name somewhere. If it's Oblivia and I say Samantha or blah blah, mistakes happen. So with that said, I am going to go out of my way to say that it's about that customary time yet again to go into this thing called spoiler time. It's about that time I'm going to spoil this episode. So let's go into the very beginning of this awkward episode, because it opens awkwardly with Jessica Hyde peeing standing up, watching this group with a gun to them, just like what a just like masculine just approach to the opening of this show. Basically having us like see Jessica as this consistent character that is going to be awful to the rest of this group. And like Wilson kind of breaks it down as like Jessica is just using us to get what she needs. Like she's using our arms or our legs or our brains for whatever that she needs to get the job done. So we go on and we have Jessica who's telling everybody to get ready for a funeral, and so everybody's immediately thinking Jessica, like we're gonna have like Samantha's funeral because she's still technically dead here, and Jessica is like not that funeral. Like what the fuck? Come on, dead body? Are you gonna bury her anytime soon? What if these people get back from vacation from the other episode? Whatever, right? Like, I'm sure Jessica killed those people too. She just doesn't want to say it, that she murdered those people. Anyways. Jessica and the group are to go on to Olivia's funeral. If anybody doesn't remember who Olivia is, because it's been a while, pilot episode. Olivia, of course, was the girl married to the guy who was to have the Utopia comic book that he found in his grandfather's house. So, we had them kind of sizing people up in this by this church, this funeral place. Becky is going on and looking at some douche. And she's like, no, not that guy. So, all of a sudden, we have Becky who's mentioning, well, there's a woman with the brooch here named Dawn. And so she will probably have some answers here. So, Becky goes on and is to make it to this, or to get into this funeral right next to Dawn. And so, Becky, of course, says to Dawn, it's like, I'm sorry for your loss. And Dawn's like, no, I'm sorry for your loss. It's hard to lose a friend. And I'm like, what a racist bitch. Like, you didn't have, like, I don't know, that could have meant nothing, but still, I could have honestly said that might have seemed like a freaking racist comment, but whatever. So, it could have been her, like, her cousin, uncle, nephew, something or other, some part of the family. Anyways, so Becky's going on and questioning, of course, this Dawn, and while we have that going on, we have Ian and Wilson in the car, handcuffed by Jessica, and Wilson is asking for some kind of bandage to go over his eye because he's wearing these like weird pirate-like shades, so to speak. Because like one is kind of like have nothing in there, and then one is the sunglass part, whatever. Anyways, but Jessica, before Becky and Jessica are to leave, she's like, well, hey, like, Becky's a really nice girl, right? And they're like, well, yeah. And she's like, well, like, if either one of you try to leave, she's dead. And so they're like, oh, okay, I guess we're not going anywhere. So Becky and Jessica go off to this funeral. So Becky is questioning Dawn and is going and asking her about the grandfather. And so Don is tell her that the grandfather was to be this doctor who had worked at this asylum. And it seems that this patient was to give the Book of Utopia to this doctor as a gift, because what else could he do? What else could this guy do? But so we go on, and Becky is trying to figure out, like, well, do you know the location of the asylum? Do you know anything about it? And Donna's like, well, not really. If anything I know is that the asylum, like, burnt down. And they're like, ooh. Like, and everyone died. It's like, ooh, that kind of closes that chapter of that patient, whoever drew the comic book, died. And so we also have Becky, who's desperately, well, like, could I go and get the grandfather's address so I can deliver some flowers to this woman's address to just kind of put it there? Because, like, I'm Dutch and we do that kind of thing. And so Don is to give the address, and so Jessica and Becky make their way back to this car that is to be under attack by two redheads. Because all they're called is redheads. They don't actually have names here, but they look like twin brothers. And so these guys are in the midst of, like, kind of beating up both Wilson and Ian, and all of a sudden Jessica comes flying in and is to stab one of the guys in the neck, and is using the one redhead as a bullet, is using him as a shield. And so the one redhead starts firing away, and so Jessica then fires back, murders both of these guys. There's blood on the windshield, and so Jessica's like, get in the car! Let's get out of here before the cops are called. So Becky has this coffee, and she goes on and gives Ian this coffee, and they get out of there. And when they get to this home, we have Ian that's kind of thinking about running away, like running off. And so we have Becky here that's saying, well, I have the Deal's virus, so I'm going to die soon anyways. So for her, like, her putting her life at risk here, like, doesn't really, like, the factor of it is, like, she's still going to die either way. So it's going to either be under Jessica's bullet, gun, whichever, or it's probably going to be from her Deal's virus that she knew all about from the previous episode, because she's dealing with it. And so Becky is telling Ian, like, hey, like, you can run, like, you can leave, but, like, either way, Becky is not going to, like, run from death, because so Ian was tempted to leave, but no, he goes and stays with Becky, because supposedly Becky is to make Ian brave. And so, like, Ian is just telling Becky, just let me be brave. So they're going through and they're thumbing through all this hoarding crap of just newspaper clippings and all kinds of stuff. And so Wilson is to find some drawing that is to look like Utopia. And I was to, of course, try and use the thumbnail to showcase that photo, the interesting looking photo. And so Wilson is to look and see that they luckily had the address on the back of this picture. And then they also had another picture uh, showcasing all these patients that were drawing these paintings. And Jessica is to go on and look at this photo and realize that the guy holding the Utopia picture is actually her dad, is actually the scientist. So we can kind of tell, possibly through a number of these comic books, that the scientist was to possibly make a number of these things not look like the actual person, simply because that is the comic book world and this is the real world. But also we have the guy, the scientist, making from one dimension to this one. He's telling that story, which we now see the, like, this is like such a weird meta like moment, weirdly. So, and plus you also want to, like, so was this coming from a real world like thing, and we're just like finding that out now, that we're just thinking it's a comic book world, but like it was real all along? Because, and technically we're finding out about these kind of like later on, or like, or you know. So kind of like figure it out amongst yourselves. So yeah, so um the mood point about this whole thing is the address is to an asylum that is technically still like burnt down. And so now Jessica is going with Ian to go and find Artemis now. Artemis, I guess, was the woman that had trained Jessica to fight, to learn jujitsu. And so now Jessica is going to find out where she is, because Artemis is to have this code that is to help her figure out where Artemis is. That certain days of the week she is going to be at certain locations, and now Jessica is to have to figure that out. So Ian is to volunteer to go with Jessica to figure out what is kind of going on. But we have Ian, who is also just already kind of just tired of Jessica, and tired of her riddles, and tired of her rhymes, and tired of her all the time. That was dumb. Anyways, so we have Becky and we have Wilson, and so Grant is to finally send them a message back, because Grant now is to ask for Alice's computer to go and message uh, this group, and Alice is like, well, okay, but no funny stuff, or no like sex stuff. Let's just say that cryptically. Heaven forbid, right? You say any number of things on YouTube, because we'll you can't do this video, whatever. So, because Grant is to be with this Alice, and of course, Alice's mother, Kim. I say with a question mark. Yes, that is correct. So, Kim is saying that Grant can stay here as long as he wants, and Kim is also asking Grant if he's going to go to school. I'm like, Kim doesn't have the actual adoption paperwork for Grant. but like, hey, just go to school anyways. Like, what? Yeah. But so Grant is to say no, like I'm going to take today off, and so Grant goes and messages Becky and Wilson, and now Becky and Wilson are to have to figure out the riddle that this kid is talking about. So we, of course, have them looking at Dystopia, and they're seeing this building, but they don't know exactly what it's called. And so they're trying to figure out the riddle of where this kid is going to. And eventually the riddle is talking about hot and a place to check out and a guy that doesn't lie. And so they go on and they put the riddle together that it's Harold Washington Library. And so both Becky and Wilson are trying to make it there. And all of a sudden, Grant has just kind of been waiting out here for a while, and all of a sudden, this police officer has noticed this kid has been out here for a while, thinking that possibly he could be maybe a drug mule, maybe he's dealing drugs, maybe he's doing some kind of shady thing, and this police officer has to figure out what exactly it is, because this guy is like, hey, like what's in the backpack, kid? Drugs? A comic book? Nothing? Because maybe somebody has the comic book, whatever. Anyways, we have Wilson and Becky who are stuck in traffic trying to get to this library. Becky runs off to find Grant just in time. And so Becky is to play off that she is to be Grant's mother and be like, oh, hey, yeah, like, this is my son. Yeah, we're going to take him on. And so now Becky and Grant go off, and Becky is saying, like, hey, your Porsche got a flat? Like, you liar. And so, we get this hug and this reveal, and so now possibly the group may have Utopia. I don't want to say that, and eventually it seems to not come true. We also have Grant, who is to go on and kind of eat, I think, another berry of sorts from Alice's garden. So let's go on to the Michael stuff. So Michael is to get this blood sample from this kid who had this tea rash. So Michael goes on and does the whatever science that he needs to pull off here to find out that this sickness that this kid has is his flu. And Michael's like, you know what, I don't know how all of this is spreading so quickly from so many different states. It makes no sense. Because after Michael is to crazily just like, heck yeah, and flinging his hazmat suit into this kind of biohazard thing, and he's running off out of his Chicago college school thing, and running off to just make it to Colleen and tell her it's my flu. She's like, oh my god, it's your flu. We have Michael who's just tossing her phone off to the side. It's my flu. And they're like, oh my god, we can pop champagne bottles right now because you're going to come up with the vaccine and cure this thing. And they're like, yeah. It's like, a lot of people are dying minutes at a time, but yeah. Hooray, huzzah. Everybody have a party. It's Wang Chung tonight. But people are dying horrifically. So we have Michael who is going to talk to the dean, and then the dean is going to hand him off to, of course, Kevin, uh, who Kevin is now dealing with his meat plant being shut down because there had been 10 cases in St. Louis that was tied to Simpro. So now Kevin is to have, of course, both Thomas and both Sierra now kind of having to like kind of deal with this, and we have Kevin who's trying to just like like I still need to put product out. Could like you guys still test this and I still can like pack away my product? And they're like, no, that's not how it works. Like we're completely shutting you down. And so he's like, all right. Could I still make some money? so so yeah, because people are dying, and all Kevin thinks about is possibly still making money, still making profit off of this stuff, because there is no guarantee that Simpro is creating this, and so Kevin is to get the call, I guess, from this dean, and so Kevin's psyched because like, hey guys, we found the flu, we have the flu now, and like we all have it, like get all excited because they all have no. They figured out the flu. So now the dean and Michael are to meet Kevin, and we just have like Kevin who uh, is having this kind of like buttering up Michael because Kevin is like, well, yeah, like it's good that like we found this just in time, and Michael's like, well, yeah, it could have costed us a Kevin Christie, and Kevin's like, no, it could have costed us a Michael Stern, and they're like, I like this exchange here. I like where we're going with this kind of direction. So Michael and Kevin are now talking about the vaccine of things. And Michael is like, whoa, 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 whoa. Because Kevin just wants this to be launched out right away to come up with this cure to save all these people. Because Kevin is feeling desperate. Kevin is feeling like he caused all this. But Michael is to say, it's like, well, like I would have thought in your position you would want to be much more cautious, and no. Like Kevin's like, no. I'm being more desperate to get this cure out there because the flu was not tied supposedly to Simpro. So how is it that everyone was getting this? Did it have something to do with the packaging of the meat? Like how is it that people were getting this? How was it spreading if it wasn't through the meat then? Was there some magical path to fortune and power that that we're not aware of here? Reference to Ghostbusters 2, the Peter Venkman book. So straight up. Anyway, pushing on. So we have Michael mentioning that his vaccine was to be approved to use and with the Peruvian military, and like it was to, of course, be a like kind of therapeutic kind of thing. It wasn't like a full on cure, and so Michael is like, wow, this is too much to ask for, and Michael is just kind of like pulling back, and he's like, no, 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 no. And Harry's like, are you thinking that you're not going to get enough credit here? Like, are you feeling like you're like, are you like, like, are you thinking you're not going to get a good enough payout out of what we're doing here? And Michael's like, it's not about that. It's wanting to eventually put the right foot forward on this and to uh, be able to save lives instead of like giving us like slapping a band-aid on something is what I'm kind of paraphrasing here. So Michael goes on and he like doesn't really want to sign off on certain things. And so we're kind of at a crossroads here. So Michael goes back home talking to Colleen and saying how like he kind of like had Kevin wanting to jump the gun so much, and Michael was like thinking that like this has to take some time. There has to be some trials to be done, but Michael's like, well, hey, like I want to be like a part of this. Like I want this to be like me putting forth this first cure if that's what it has to be, but like that's that's what Michael wants to do. So he's packing all of his to go to basically this hot zone, this ground zero with all these patients in there. And so we have a bunch of parents all in the news desperately just saying that like they want to see their children. They want to like they'll give up whatever they need to just see their kids and just see that they're okay and they're not dead yet, because that could be a possibility. And so we have all these people just on the news, and that's when Harry, before he found out about the flu, he was like, man, like there's nothing I can do, and all I can do is just watch. Because yeah, like he's just kind of like this just this meat guy who like can't figure this out. So Michael's going to this hot zone, talking to this military person to, of course, let him in. And he's rattling off all these CDC things, and he's saying like, yeah, like let me in, and call the person to the CDC to give me access. And Michael's really just bluffing at this point about all of this stuff because he hasn't really been granted much of anything yet. And so all of a sudden, this soldier calls Michael out on his bluff, so he kind of just fades away into the crowd and is to make his way back to his car. So Michael does actually get involved in this thing, but really we just find out that there is to be a switcheroo, let's just say, going on with Michael, thinking that he, of course, is to let's just pause it there because I realize there might be a thing I won't say here, but we'll push on. Um, when we see later on episodes, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Or if you've already seen this whole show, which I'm sure you probably have, because you probably watch this on one full whole day of whatever. So let's go with Jessica and Ian to make their way to Artemis. So we have Ian and Jessica going to try and find this this homeless place where Artemis to be, and so Jessica is going through this map and finding that Wonderland is this location, and so Ian is wanting to go and pee before they go and meet up with Artemis, and Jessica is to want to basically watch Ian pee here, and Ian's like, no, like I'm gonna whip my out, and and you're not gonna be like watching over me or what. Like, let me just pee on my own. Like, I'm sick of you. And, like, I just want to whip my out and just pee. And so all of a sudden, Ian is to go on and try to whip his out. And all of a sudden, we have Artemis who goes and smacks Ian and takes him down. And so now Artemis is filling Jessica in about what had happened to her father, and also that it's to also be connected to that, like, the bunny is in this world. The Mr. Bunny is in this world somewhere. I guess maybe Artemis possibly doesn't know where he actually is. For this episode, who, like, maybe she probably does know. So, because she has those weird nail combinations on her fingers with all the numbers that when they're kind of ripping those off, I'm like, oh my god, that's freaking awful. Like, I had just seen the movie called Wolf, and like we had a moment there where somebody loses a nail in that movie. I'm like, this is gross. No, I remember this, but still, it's gross. I don't like people losing their nails. It reminds me of The Fly, which is also a gross film. But I watched it. I reviewed it. Because I review almost everything, because that's just what I do. Hence this. So, so Artemis is to be happy that Jessica is to finally find her. And so Jessica was to mention that her father was to go on about death, and that Jessica's father was to lose his mind and to finally snap. And so Artemis took Jessica's father to the asylum, and it seemed that at some point for that asylum, there was only a matter of time before before Mr. Bunny was going to find Jessica's father, simply because the comic books started to surface. Dystopia started to surface. Utopia started to surface. And so once this mad scientist had gone on to do that, then Artemis needed to go after Jessica's father and burn his asylum down to the ground, because she wanted this mad scientist's brain off the board, so that way Mr. Bunny wouldn't get to him and corrupt him like he had done before. So Jessica, now realizing that her dad is dead, and both of them are now in this kind of abandoned bathroom. Artemis is to of course say here that she broke, and she broke easy. And Artemis is kind of hinting at who Mr. Bunny is here. And so we have Jessica, who now is to not like the fact that it seems that Artemis is broken, and that Artemis can't do this anymore. She can't run anymore. Like, she's tired of all this. So both Jessica and Artemis are going to have to forcibly fight it out here. And so Artemis is telling Jessica, it's like, well, hey, like, muscle memory and like just me, like, just like risky, like, or wanting to save my own life is probably going to have a problem for you trying to end it, kind of thing. So, paraphrasing here. So all of a sudden, Jessica is to go on and try to choke out freaking Artemis. Ian comes into the way of things and tries to prevent, of course, Jessica from killing Artemis. But like Ian gets chucked to the side, and so Jessica continues on to kind of go through the battle with Artemis, like going into possibly bathroom stall, and but eventually Jessica goes and chokes Artemis pretty well here. So Artemis tells Jessica that once she is to find her home, to burn it to the ground. And so Artemis dies here, and then Jessica is to peel off her fingernails and to find this number combination. It was kind of funny how Ian and Jessica were in this car together, and Jessica was mentioning how she was trained, and Ian was going on and saying, it's like, well, you can't even use a cell phone. And Jessica says, well, like, I was trained to kill, I wasn't trained to text, kind of thing. That was kind of funny. It's like, who gives a about texting? Because a lot of people probably still don't. But with that said, let's cover the last bit of this. So, we have Christy, who is at home being comforted by his wife, getting a couple of kisses in there. All of a sudden, after I think Lori is to leave, we have Arby who appears here and is kind of like hey, and so now, like at first, if you were to watch this originally, you're thinking like, oh, like Arby is wanting to snuff out this guy, uh, because like they don't want to like Arby doesn't want this cure going out, or this and that. Now that he probably knows that there is a cure, or any number of things. But then when Arby and Christy sit down together, and Christy is to give Arby these raisins, we're like, ah, Christy is Mr. Bunny. Christy is the devil here. And so, of course, Christy is to ask Arby, like, what did you do today to earn your place in this crowded world? And so Arby is to rattle off all the people that he has killed, which is to be 25 people in total and an eye. And so Christy is like kind of hugging Arby and saying like, well, like I know that this is hard for you. And Arby's like, no, it's not. But yeah, so but we have Christy who's like wanting an update about what's going on. Like, hey, like where is Utopia? Do you have Utopia yet? And Arby's like, well, it's left with a kid called Grant, and so they're trying to track it down, or really just Arby is tracking it down because Rod is dead, and Christy is to mention about how Rod is dead, and so yeah, so yeah, like that's a kind of a bulk of the breakdown of this episode. There might have been something that slipped my mind for whatever reason. There might have been a big part of something that but I think I kind of covered most of this episode. There's something that I probably forgot. That's little details. A lot of like when there's dialogue, I don't always go into it 100% or whatever. But like at least I'll get the meat and potatoes of every single episode. So with that said, I think I'm going to get out of here because at the end of the day, it's time for me to go out of my way to watch some other thing to call this a wrap for today. So goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.